Okay, so we have one group that still needs to answer the critical thinking challenge that we started last time about is marketing and art or science. And then we will discuss all of your answers. Most of you gave us good answers. So we've got one group left to stand up and give their plangent response to the critical thinking challenge. Today, you will also have an opportunity to earn points individually for bonus points that will be added onto your first exam if you can answer some critical thinking questions on an individual level. Did you email me about not being able to? Okay, right after class, if you will see me, we'll try and figure out what's going on with the Dropbox for your group. Because you are enrolled, I looked to make sure everything was there. Do you see the Dropbox?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So are you trying to upload a Word document or?
Yes, yeah, for
Okay,
the marketing history.
okay,
It's
all right.
closed.
It's closed? I don't think so. Okay, there may be two Dropboxes there. You might look, we'll look after as soon as class is over, so.
Anyone not get the roll sheet?
Are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Sort of, kind of. You can wing it. Oh. Okay, so is marketing an art or science?
We said it was a science.
You said it's a science,
Yeah.
okay.
And like one of the first example was like the scientific method, and the second example was like.
So the scientific method, how are you gonna apply the scientific method to?
Well, because you have to ask questions, you gotta ask what's popular right now, what are people looking at,
Okay,
and you gotta come up with a hypothesis, like come up with a plan. You gotta test it, and if it doesn't work, then you take it back, fix what didn't work, and then you draw your conclusion and find out what does.
okay, all right,
And then our second example was you have to compare market trends to find out what would work.
all right.
And then.
So then maybe marketing history is also important if you're looking at marketing trends, because the past is often prologue for the future. Okay,
And then third one is kind of going with the scientific methods, but it's all about like trial and error, you know? It's all about like, because some methods might not work for certain products, you gotta depend on what you're trying to sell, so you gotta ask people again like what they like, and then how it can help you to sell like your certain product, I guess.
okay, so you're saying that there's also like a learning and a feedback. You try something, if it doesn't work, you adjust to the market conditions, and that's a form of science, is
Yeah.
to learn how to.
It's really all about
correct.
looking at like, you know, data, and then, you know, trying different things to see how you can market your.
Maybe like you get a toy store,
Okay,
and then you look at the data, see which age groups you would buy for, or like kind of which toys you would get and which ones you wouldn't,
okay,
just to see which one is better fit.
all right. Is everything that we teach on a college campus an art or a science?
We said science just because a lot of things follow step by step on campus, like.
Okay, so even art, I mean, you learn, when you learn paint, you learn certain processes and stuff, and that could be considered scientific in the approach to it.
Like I took an art class last year or something, but even though like art, it is a lot of talent, but it's also a lot of steps that you had to take. As I can't draw at all, but she would walk us through, and there were just steps we could like take. Even beginner like painting classes, you start with like the circle, and then you just build off of that. It's all just, I mean, it's not all just steps, but.
All right, what's the difference between art and science?
So for this one, we said art is more, it can be more like talent-based or abstract, whereas science is more based on like factual and like data.
Okay,
And so that's what we said.
so for art, that might be something that's you either have it or you don't, and it's not something that you necessarily. Well, I mean, a lot of people say I can't sing. Everybody can sing. It's whether, or, I mean, you can open your, unless your tongue is cut out, or you have no vocal cords, you can open your mouth and project. It's whether or not it's good.
Because everyone can draw, but it's whether or not it's,
Yeah,
I can draw a face, but it's not gonna look like a face.
right,
But
okay.
someone who's artistic.
Okay, so, and science is something that you can sort of learn.
Yeah.
Step by step. Okay, all right, what do you guys think of their answer? Very good. All right. So, is marketing an art or a science? I think my answer would be that it's both. It is an art. There are art aspects to it. Obviously, the art of persuasion and professional sales is an art. Reading your customer and knowing that. I mean, there are people that just are not good at understanding what people are thinking or how they're reacting. If you watch The Big Bang Theory, I like The Big Bang Theory. My family insists that I am Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory, if you have a character. And Sheldon doesn't understand sarcasm. And so he has to, he doesn't understand a lot of things that normal human beings understand. And so when you're selling, understanding and being able to read your prospect is somewhat of an art. But there's obviously, as many of you pointed out, a science to it. We can study what consumers want from a scientific perspective. We don't just go out there and try things and hope they'll work, although a lot of businesses do. The vast majority of businesses will fail within the first 5 years of opening. Something like 90% of businesses will fail within the first 5 years. And one of the reasons that they'll fail is because they project what psychologists call projection, maybe their own desires onto the marketplace where there isn't a need. The fact that somebody thinks that Kewpie dolls are just the most wonderful things on the planet doesn't mean that everybody's going to want to buy Kewpie dolls. And so if you lifelong dream is to open up a Kewpie doll store and you do it, you do any market research, you're probably going to fail. And a lot of businesses do fail, and a lot of them do fail because they don't engage in sort of a scientific perspective with regard to determining what it is that the market will bear. Is everything an art or a science on a college campus? Well, I think there is maybe a third category, and that's pure logic. If you've taken a course in logic and critical thinking, there are things that you can do in mathematics in terms of being logic, doesn't always have some basis in reality. And so there may be this third category on a college campus. Most things are either an art or a science, although what is being considered an art or a science, as some of you have alluded to through your answers, is beginning to change. Forever and ever and ever, the idea was that beauty was extraordinarily subjective, that it was in the eye of the beholder. But you now have philosophers who have historically never engaged in empirical research, conducting empirical research in the field of aesthetics and what is considered beautiful. One of the experiments that they do is they take babies, children, and they set them in front of screens and watch their reactions to various faces. And children will look at a symmetrical face like Denzel Washington far longer than they will look at an ugly face, or what is considered a traditionally sort of ugly, asymmetrical face. Think of Lyle Lovett. He was married to Julia Roberts. You all probably don't know who he is. You can Google him. He was a country and western singer, not very popular. His biggest claim to fame was that he got Julia Roberts to marry him, but he's got a very asymmetrical face. His jawline is offset. He's got one ear that is significantly, most people have one ear that's slightly lower than the other and one ear canal that's slightly larger or smaller than the other, but it's significant.
What's his name?
Face.
What's his name?
Lyle Lovett. And he has got this kind of curved hair top. And it's just like, babies are enormously honest. They'll sit there and cry if you flash that picture on the screen. They'll sit there and watch Denzel Washington for a long time. They've also started doing empirical research in terms of looking at artists, and what they pay. If they say paint an idealistic scene, artists the globe over in all cultures paint similar scenes in terms of proportionality. It's almost always a bucolic scene. And it always contains some water feature, and the proportions are the same. And so what we are considering as being beautiful seems to be less and less subjective than perhaps we had initially thought. What's the difference between art and science? Obviously, art is more subjective and science is more objective. And I think that's the gold key answer. So considering that we consider marketing to be a science. That's where we get the third philosophy in marketing, and it begins in 1960. In 1960, we now realize that it's no longer just enough. The production era is, if you build it, they will come. The sales era is, now we've got more and more sellers or more and more producers in the marketplace. We're gonna have to get these people out there to sell our products, to get it, and market it, and push it. Then there's a recognition that we really need to study the consumer from a scientific perspective, and that begins the marketing era in 1960, where we actually go about studying consumers in a very, very methodical way, and that's the birth of marketing science. Marketing is the combination of two disciplines, both of which I will make merciless fun of throughout the semester. So marketing as an academic discipline starts in the early 1900s. And really that early period in marketing is focused on logistics studies. So that's the part of marketing nobody thinks about as being marketing, but it is marketing. It's how do you get your goods to market in the most efficient way so that they don't spoil. And so a lot of the early marketing studies come out of places like the University of Wisconsin. What do they produce a lot of in Wisconsin? What's Wisconsin known? Cheese. So how do you get your cheese to market before it spoils? Because that's obviously a good that is perishable. And so they focused on these logistics studies, farm to market studies. And then with the 1960s, that was the earliest marketing studies were in logistics and how we get things to the consumer in the most efficient manner. We start studying the consumer themselves, and that's psychology. So the two foundational disciplines of marketing are economics, and specifically agricultural economics, and psychology, studying the consumer and consumer behavior. In the 1990s, we started to recognize that now customers have a lifetime value. And so it's no longer just about studying the consumer, it's now about building relationships. So there's something called CLV, which is customer lifetime value. And the recognition is that it's easier to keep a customer than it is to go prospecting for new customers. Prospecting is difficult. In the sales book that we use for professional selling in this program, they talk about Sewell Cadillac in Dallas. You will see Sewell Cadillacs being driven in Oklahoma City. You'll see the Sewell emblem on, and it's because they have such a good reputation. Unlike most car dealerships, which have a really bad reputation, most people, when they think of selling, think of car sales. Sewell has a really good reputation. And at the time, Mr. Sewell wrote a book when he got very successful, and he talks about the $275,000 buyer. That's the average amount at the time he started discussing this. That's the average amount a Cadillac consumer would buy over the course of their lifetime. If you multiply that to include the people that they will encourage through word of mouth, they become over $1 million lifetime valuable asset. And so keeping customers, recognizing that we need to have this idea of relationships becomes really central beginning in the 1990s into about the present time. We recognize that it's a relationship there. But again, you can still see examples of companies engaging in these older types of philosophies. Apple under Steve Jobs engaged in a production philosophy. Microsoft still engages, in my opinion, in a production philosophy. Lots of companies that sell consumer packaged goods rely on just a sales philosophy. They're not building long-term relationships necessarily with consumers. There are companies that just do sort of marketing. I think Walmart has done a brilliant job of being a marketing company. They figured out what the customers want, which is everyday low prices. And now they're starting to work on relationships and recognizing that people don't just want to have, I'm like a man going to the gallows when I go to Walmart. I have to go there, but now they're starting to build more relationships. They're working on adding to the services that they offer. So you can now order from Walmart online and go pick it up at the store, and they'll even bring it out to you as personal shoppers. So working on that relationship era, relationship philosophy. So what is the first thing that we have to do when we decide that something is a science? What do you think we have to do? So what makes marketing a science distinct from, say, biology. What is biology? If I asked you what the definition of biology is, it's the study of what?
Life.
The study of life. It's the study of life, that's right. What's physics? Physics thinks they're the mother discipline of science. Just ask Sheldon Cooper, theoretical physicist. What's physics? The study of matter and motion. Yeah, the study of matter and motion is generally physics. What's chemistry?
Study of reactions.
Study of chemical reactions. So what is marketing? What makes marketing different from, say, psychology? What makes it a distinct field? What makes it different from sociology? Advertising? Okay, maybe.
How you approach it.
Study of how people spend their money.
Okay. Maybe it's money, although we can use marketing in other contexts. So we have to establish the domain. Once we decide that we can study something from a scientific perspective, we have to study it from, we have to decide what the boundaries of that domain are. So we look at definitions. What's the scientific method? And we start looking at definitions. And the definition of marketing has changed over time. The first definition of marketing was offered by the National Association of Marketing Teachers, which is the forerunner to the American Marketing Association. It goes all the way back to 1935. And they said that marketing is the performance of business activities that direct the flow of goods and services from producers to consumers. So here you see this idea of logistics. This is keeping with that idea of early studies in marketing were about how we can get our goods to the consumer in the most efficient way. So you had agriculture economists actually getting on trains and seeing where they went, seeing how you could get there the fastest route to get your goods to the consumer in the most efficient way. But there's a problem with this definition. What is it that you would say maybe is and if you can come up with an answer, maybe with 5 bonus points, you have to see me, by the way, before you leave class, because I will forget to give it to you. So that's one of the things that I want to emphasize. On days when I offer individual bonus points for answering critical thinking challenge, not just group bonus points, you need to be sure and run to the front of the classroom after we're done and get your bonus points. Because I have a horrible memory and will not remember. So what's wrong with this definition?
It doesn't study the consumer at all.
Yeah, it doesn't really involve, that's a good point. It doesn't have anything about really the consumer until you get to the end. And it's just mostly about the business activities that get it to the consumer. That's worth some points. Anybody else find something wrong?
It's also, sorry,
Go ahead.
it's also back in 1935,
Uh-huh.
so its customers are going to be a lot different, consumers are going to be a lot different from what they would be today.
Okay.
Kind of outdated in a way.
So it's really focused on for profit, I think is what you're saying. And there's a lot of difference today. That's worth some points.
It's not just the performance of business activity.
Ah, that's it. Yeah, I think this is the big fatal flaw with this definition is that it's not just the performance of business activities. Lots and lots and lots of organizations that are not businesses, nonprofits, engage in marketing. They're not just business. Nonprofits are not in business to make a profit, right? They're in business to satisfy certain other things. Governments are not business. Although a lot of people think that that's a good thing. We should elect businessmen to run governments, and then they are remarkable failures. We elected a governor. I worked for him. His name was David Walters. I worked on his campaign. He said, "I'm a businessman. I don't know anything about politics." And then he proceeded to be one of the worst governors Oklahoma's ever had because he tried to run it like a business, and it's not a business. Government doesn't run like a business. For example, he didn't understand in a business, he'd owned a real estate company. And in a real estate company, if you're the boss, if you're the broker, and you say do this and do that, what do your subordinates do?
Do that and do that.
They do this and do that. And in government, if you're governor of the great state of Oklahoma and you say, do this and do that, what happens?
They don't.
Nothing. Yeah, nothing happens. Why is that? The governor has virtually no power. The governor doesn't have direct, for example, I am a state employee. I'm an employee of the government. But the governor has no control really over this institution because we're a constitutional entity. So the governor appoints the Board of Regents, but once they're appointed, they sit for a fixed term. And a governor can't appoint all of the regents. They're staggered terms. And once they appoint a regent, they have the power to appoint the regent, but the regent doesn't have to do what the governor wants, necessarily. And we actually have two boards of regents. We have the big board, the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education, and then we have the little board. And so nothing happens. And yet, in spite of that, in spite of the, if you're CEO of General Motors, you can say to people, do this and do that, and they do it. But in spite of the fact that the governor can't come down here and tell us what to do, we still use marketing. The state of Oklahoma still uses marketing. They have a website. You can go to ok.gov. And they're marketing that, they're providing services, but they're not a business. This definition was adopted when the AMA was formed in 1948 and again in 1960, and it stood for about 50 years. And then in the mid-1980s, the AMA began revisions on the definition. So in 1985, they refined it and they said, marketing is the process of planning and executing the conception, pricing, promotion, and distribution of ideas. So this is a big one. We've gone from goods to now we can use ideas. Now we can include ideas, goods and services to create exchanges that satisfy individuals and organizational objectives. Now this is a better definition in that it includes a number of things. First of all, it includes ideas. It includes this idea of exchange, which may be central to marketing, that satisfy individuals, so it recognizes that even you engage in marketing. You want people to like you. You market yourself constantly, whether you think about it or not. You want your friends to do what you want to do. So you have to use marketing techniques to get them to do it. You have to persuade them. So this is a pretty good definition. The textbook gives you the current definition, which is what you should know for an exam, and then what I add to that definition. So the current definition says marketing is the activity for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that benefit an organization or individual's customers, the organization, its stakeholders, and society at large. So now it's a recognition that it's a really macro level activity, that it's not just individuals, it's not just organizations, but society at large. And so corporate social responsibility has become important in this. So there's a whole lot of people. What I would say that needs to be added to that, and you should know for the exam, is that I believe the definition should begin with marketing is a pervasive social activity. What do I mean by pervasive? If you take a drop of food coloring and you put it into a glass of water, what happens over time? You drop it in and initially the water's still clear, and over time what happens? Changes colors until the whole glass is what? Whatever color you put in there, blue. It pervades. That's marketing. Marketing is a pervasive activity. You cannot escape it. Even if you try, you're going to engage in marketing. Very rarely do I have students that say, I just don't like marketing, it's boring. I started out as a political scientist and students would tell me that. I just don't like government, it's boring. But government is pervasive as well. Everything you do is touched by government. From how fast you can drive to the qualifications of the person that writes the prescription for your eyeglasses is touched by government. Marketing is the same way. You can't abate, I guess you could go up on the mountaintop and live like Grizzly Adams and escape marketing, but most people can't do that. You're gonna have to engage in marketing. You're constantly bombarded by marketing. Everything that you are wearing has been marketed to you. You are marketed to before you're even born. Drug companies come up with things like what? That they market to your parents before you're even born. Neonatal vitamins. Neonatal care. The idea that you should go see a doctor when you become pregnant. You don't just wing it anymore. They've now convinced parents that they need to go, even before you're born, to do all of these things to ensure the health and safety of the child that they're carrying. So even before you're born, people are marketing to you until the day that you die. You can't just be thrown out in the trash, can you? When you die, they can't just throw your body out on the curb, leave it there. What do you have to have? You have to, well, you don't have to have a funeral, but you have to have something. We don't just put you in the dump. So there are people that, cremation services, funeral services, caskets. So from the moment you are born, before you're even born, you're marketed to, until the day you die, we market to you. And maybe even after that. Religion markets the afterlife. Vapid Joel Osteen, who knows nothing about theology. Good marketer. And what's he really marketing to you?
His church.
Yeah. And the afterlife. The cosmic cookie. So maybe even after death, we're still marketing to you. So marketing is this pervasive. When you are a baby, you begin to market to your parents. You cry, you let them know you have needs. That's marketing. You start screaming, and they start looking for something to satisfy your needs. What is it that he needs? Does he need a bottle, diaper changed, picked up, held? And so you begin marketing at birth. So it's a pervasive social activity. We can't escape it. So what is needed for marketing to occur? Well, you're going to have more than one activity. If it's a social activity, if it is a pervasive social activity, you can't really market to yourself, I guess. You can satisfy your own wants and needs, but generally, that's sort of, you're going to have more than one party. You're going to have a desire and an ability on each party's part to be satisfied. You may have a need. How many of you are hungry right now? It's 8 a.m. It's early. Unlike me, most of you probably didn't get up at 5.
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
5:30.
How many of you rolled out of bed 30 minutes before this class started and drove? The nice thing about coming for 8 a.m. classes, folks, is there's plenty of parking out there. 9:30, the parking gets a little tenuous. Hey, I'm doing you a favor by having this class at 8 o'clock. It ensures that you got premium parking here. You can thank me later.
That's also marketing.
What?
That's also marketing.
That's right, it's marketing. So I've been up at 5. I get up every day at 5. That's why I like to teach. I want to teach classes at 7. We used to do that. They won't let me do that. But I get up at 5 every morning. So, I'm probably not hungry. Actually, I'm starving because I didn't eat breakfast this morning. But I had plenty of time to fix breakfast if I wanted it. But most of you are probably, you rolled out of bed 30 minutes before you got here and you threw on your clothes and got here and you're probably hungry. Can I satisfy that need that you have right now? No, I can't. In terms of, if we're looking at just breakfast marketing, I don't have, you may have a desire. I may want to be able, if I guess I could bring breakfast sandwiches and start selling them. I may have a desire, but I don't have any today. So we can't, at least with regard to that, we can't engage in marketing. We're gonna have communication. And something to exchange. You're gonna have to have something to exchange. Now, what is it that, these can be feelings. What is it that you exchange with your friends? What is it, you're exchanging stuff with your friends. When you market to your friends, what are you exchanging? Ideas, feelings, emotions, good times, experiences. It doesn't have to be money. You're exchanging something. Your friend says, let's go to the movies. They're marketing to you. There's an idea. Let's go to the movies. I hate going to the movies.
Do you really?
I do. I absolutely hate it.
Why?
Because they come out on demand or whatever so quickly now that why the hell would you go to the movies? I mean, you can't use I'm like addicted to this thing. It's like crack. It's a crack phone. Right? And I can't use this in there. I have to, I want, if I'm going to watch a movie, I want to sit there and be able to still play on my phone or do something. I mean, I can't give up that much time.
That's why I like going to the movies, because
'Cause
you
it's-
separate yourself from everything.
From everything
And you're
else.
just in the movie.
Yeah.
That's why I like going.
I mean, I want to be able to look at my phone. If I don't like it, I want to be able to turn the channel, turn it off. I don't want to watch it, but I go to the movies. There's a new movie theater out here on Covell Road. It's kind of cool. They've got a little arcade and bowling.
Where's this place? at?
And
Showbiz?
yeah, it's showbiz. Yeah.
BYOB.
No.
It's dope, bro.
It's called
It's,
Showbiz?
It's one of those that actually serves big boy and big girl drinks, which I appreciate.
You
So,
just bring the cooler.
it's
Oh,
it's better
Okay,
than
yeah,
other
okay.
movies, but I go because my friends or my family want to go. And what am I exchanging? I'm exchanging my time in exchange for knowing that this is what it takes to build relationships. Even though I don't want to go to the movies, sometimes I have to compromise on what I want, or I'm not going to have any friends. My family can't really run away, but they may not want to do things that I want to do. And so I'm exchanging my time. Or I'm exchanging ideas. So something to exchange. It doesn't have to be money or goods. It can be ideas. It can be intangibles that are very, very abstract, like feelings and emotions. Any questions about that? All right, so now we need to move into marketing strategy. And here you have an opportunity to get some more bonus points on the first exam. So strategy, what is strategy? Well, strategy is about goals. So what is this is my first question for which you can get some bonus points. What is a goal?
And your result.
Something you want to accomplish. All right. So that's worth a couple of points. But that's not just good enough. What's a good goal? Somebody give me their goal.
I want to be financially free, like not have to be stressed about money ever.
Okay, you want to be financially free and not stressed about money ever. Is that a good goal?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Why do you think that's a good goal?
Why?
Yeah, why is that a good goal?
Because, you know,
I'm not sure it's a good goal.
I mean, I believe it's a good goal, just because like people do live paycheck to paycheck and that's very stressful on the person. But I mean, you're still living, so that's always a good part. But if you want to relieve stress out of your life and not live paycheck to paycheck and just be, you know, financially stable to be able to do more stuff than work, you know, more than 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week. And that's, you know, being financially stable just sounds like a better life to me than having to live paycheck to paycheck.
Okay, we are finding out that a lot of people right now are going to be hurt because they do live pay, they spend every single thing, you know, and it's hard. If you have, it's the reason that I don't have kids. I'm selfish. You know, kids take money,
A lot of it.
a lot of money. And I don't want to spend my money on them. I'm going to spend my money on me. But the government is shut down as a result of an impasse between the Democrats and President Trump. And a lot of people are going without paychecks. They're coming up on the second pay period that they're going to go without paychecks. And if they were more financially responsible, although it's hard to be financially responsible when you're, you know, middle class, because it's expensive to live.
Mhm.
Housing is expensive. Electricity is expensive. Gas to go to work is expensive. Food is expensive. And so you say that this is a good goal. But what makes the goal itself good? I mean, you've expressed some rationale for the goal,
Mhm.
which is,
Makes you
it
happy.
sounds better to me to have that than to not,
Right.
which is at least something more than I threw a dart at a dartboard. But what in and of itself makes the goal good?
Makes you personally happy.
It makes you personally happy? That's pretty subjective.
I think if the goal is very clearly defined.
Okay, so there's one thing that we're gonna have to have a good goal. We're gonna have to have a clear definition of the goal. So if we say that you have to have a clear definition of the goal, your goal was to be financially successful and not have to worry about money. Is that a clear enough definition of what the goal should be? No, probably not. When I was growing up, if you had $1 million, people thought you were set for life. You could retire and do nothing, live off the interest. In 1973, when I was born, the average automobile cost $6,000. The average American home sold for $30,000. You could buy a dozen eggs for 55 cents, and gas was 75 cents a gallon. $1 million went a long way. If you have $1 million, can you be set today?
Not for a lot of.
Not for life. Let's figure out, let's say you had $1 million today and you wanted to retire. Let's figure a conservative, although given the stock market right now, rate of return of 3%. What are you gonna be living off of if you have $1 million at 3%? Somebody do the math. You can get out a calculator if you need it, you shouldn't have to. What?
30,000.
$30,000, is that enough to live off of? A year?
Not this year.
Not this year? People live off of a lot less. I guess you could be. I mean, if you don't have a lot of wants and needs,
I was gonna say that, you wanna live the bare minimum.
yeah. I mean, $30,000, that's, I don't know,
Teacher's salary,
it's a teacher's salary, not a marketing professor's salary.
high school teacher,
Uh,
a high school.
high school teacher. Yeah. It's the reason I took this job. Marketing professors make more money. I guess you could live off that. Lots of people live off of far less,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure that that's what you would mean by financially successful, right? So we've got to come up with what is financially independent. So we're gonna have to define that goal, and it's gonna be different for everybody, right? It's not necessarily gonna be the same. I can say that in order to be financially independent, I would need, well, you know, if I wanted to not work ever again, the average marketing salary, I'll tell you this, we don't pay this quite at UCO, but we pay over 6 figures. The average marketing salary starting this year is $160,000 a year. That's the average starting salary of a marketing professor. UCO pays below market, we're at the 25th percentile, but we're still over 6 figures for a marketing professor. The reason I'm telling you this is you can look up my salary. You can go over to the library, look it up. You can get online and look at my salary and see what I make. It's out there for the public to know. So my colleagues who try to hide these things, it's like, they can Google it. Unlike the private sector where they keep salary hidden, you can figure out exactly, you can get on the Oklahoma website and download what we're making. If you do it for this year, it will give you an odd figure because it gives you not the salary itself, but what's been paid out. So you have to calculate in, so like right now, my salary, if you went on the Oklahoma employees website, it would say that it's, I haven't gotten a paycheck in January yet. Or I got one paycheck in January. But you'd have to do last year to figure it out. But you could do it, right? I mean, it's not difficult to do. So if I wanted to be financially independent, given that my salary is over 6 figures, and I wanted to stop working today, and we can figure a rate of return of 3%, how many million am I going to have? To do that? In assets that are making money, that are producing money.
10 million? Would be
It's
around
not
there.
going to be 10 million.
To make what you're making. Like,
To make what I'm making,
About 5.
about 4. Yeah. I mean, in order to be able to just have exactly not, but you have to figure that, cost of living is going to go up, right? So you got to figure that in. Cost of living might go up. So if I want to continue, I'm going to have to maybe have more than that. If I want to, have money to reinvest so that it keeps up with inflation. So I'm not saying that you have a bad goal there. It's just that we need to get more specific. So what else should we do in terms? So now we've got a clearly defined goal. I want to retire today. Let's say that, and I want to be financially secure. So I'm going to have, let's say, $5 million so that I can plan to take what I would get off of the interest and earnings of that money from investments and be able to reinvest some, to put some back towards the principal so that would continue to grow over time. So let's say, I'd say I've got to have $5 million. What can we do to make that goal even better? So now we've defined it. I want to be financially secure. And by financial security, I mean, I want to be able to, all other things being equal, be able to stop working today and not have any change in my lifestyle. So I'm gonna have to have $5 million. What else can we do to make that a better goal? So now we've defined what financial security is. What else can we do to make the goal better?
timeline.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to have, when do you wanna do this? So we're gonna have to have some time. So now we've defined the goal, but if you don't have some time, it's just out there. I wanna be able to retire someday. Well, when is that? When I'm dead? Huh?
You have to set certain time.
Right, yeah, you want to have some timeline. I want to be able to retire. I can tell you all when I'm gonna retire in 10 years, when I'm 55. And hang it up. So that's, all right. That's the second step. So we
Don't
have
you have a business?
definition, I do. We have a time. What else?
You need a plan?
Huh?
A plan?
We need a plan, okay? So we need a goal, a time frame, and then maybe some plan on how you're going to achieve this, some steps in this process as to how you're going to do it and some way of measuring it. So goals. So I want you to think about these when we talk about marketing strategy. The text talks a lot about big companies. I want you to think about this as how you can use this in your personal life. Because big companies have goals, you also have goals. How is this applicable to you? So what is a good goal? And by good goal, we have to define what it means to be good, right? And from that perspective, we can get into a debate as to whether or not a goal is moral, a moral goal, as opposed to one that's just logically based, right? So what's a good goal versus morality versus what we can do in logic? So a good goal is, as we've said, it's specific, objective. I used to have students, when I taught American National Government, I had students write a paper called My American Dream. And what I wanted them to do in this paper was I wanted them to list goals and objectives. And a lot of them would say, my goal is to just love Jesus. That might be a worthy sentiment, right?
Mhm.
But I don't know a number of things. I'm not sure it's a goal. Maybe, like I said, it may be a worthy sentiment, but as far as a goal goes, I mean, how are you ever going to measure that? How are you going to know when you've achieved that goal? Right? So specific, objective, the more specific we get, the better. Should be measurable. So what's wrong with the goal of, my goal is to love Jesus? Well, how do you measure that? Can you love Jesus more tomorrow? It's not, I don't know how you measure that. Again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that sentiment. But as far as a goal goes, I'm not sure, if you said my goal is to become a minister and, preach the gospel, well, that we can measure, can't we? Like now, did you become a minister in a specific time frame? Did you go and get a degree in theology, which, by the way, Joel Osteen has not. No degree in theology. And it should be realistic. This is not to say that you should not have stretch goals. Usually, I'm kind of impressed that you came up with something that wasn't like graduate from college. That's the first thing everybody says in this class usually. So I'm impressed that you came up with something unique. Because everybody says, my goal is to graduate with college. Well, okay, that's sort of a good goal, but going to graduate from college with what? A degree in underwater basket weaving?
I really wish that was a degree.
What's that?
I said that'd be so funny if that was a degree.
Well, I mean, that's about as useful as a degree. I mean, we have degrees here on campus, like musical theater. What are you going to do with that?
Probably.
Yeah, right. You're going to be, you want fries with that order? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's true though.
That's the truth.
One of my friend is in a major like that, and it just makes me laugh every time she does something. I just look at her, I'm like, what are you gonna do after?
Right. I mean, they all think, no, you're probably not.
Another major is like the dance majors at OCU.
Yeah.
I have like two buddies or two
What
girls.
are you gonna do? What are you gonna do with that? I don't know. So graduate from college, I'm gonna get a degree in musical theater? No. I hope most of your parents said no. You said that. I'm sorry if that hurts your heart. but, so I want to graduate from college. Well, okay, so what's a better goal? I want to graduate from college with a degree in professional sales. That's a great goal.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're gonna have to, in a specific timeline, right? I want to graduate with a degree from the University of Central Oklahoma in professional selling in 2 years. Well, now, this is the realistic part. You have to have 124 hours, is that right? 124 hours, 124 credit hours to graduate. They have to have some semblance of coherence in that. So is it realistic to think that you could get, can you do that in 2 years?
Maybe 3.
Maybe, if you went summers and intersessions and all of that, maybe you could do it in 3 years, but it's really tough. The average person now takes 5 years to get a baccalaureate degree. Why is that? My mother thought I got my bachelor's degree in 4 years. My mother thought I was a layabout. She did hers in 3. And she thought I was horribly lazy because I did it in 4. The average person now takes 5. Why is that? When I went to college, my parents could afford to pay for it. UCO and OU and OSU, where my brother and I went, were all cheap. All cheap. They could write the check. It was less than, I think my tuition at OU when I started was less than $2,000 a semester.
Jesus Christ.
What is it now?
Year 5,000.
A year?
5,000 a semester?
Yeah.
Here?
This semester for me, it was 4,800.
Okay. With the fees?
You see,
It's like-
OU's
So-
year's like 22, 24.
So, it's expensive. So most of you have to do what? Work.
Loans.
You have to work. So it may not be realistic to graduate even in 4 years, but that's if you said, I want to graduate in 4 years, that's a realistic goal. It's at least realistic, or 3 years. And you can measure it. You can see whether or not you're on track to do that. So organizations. So goals are individually, organizationally dependent. Your goals are going to be different from my goals. Organizations' goals are going to be different from each other. So we have different types of organizations when we talk about strategy. We have for-profit organizations. Now, what is the basis? This is mostly what we'll be talking about in this class. I've argued to you that marketing is a pervasive social activity. You all market, but most of what we're going to be talking about in this course, in terms of the examples that we give, are going to be for-profit organizations. So what is the goal ultimately for a for-profit organization? To what?
To make profit.
To make a profit. To make a profit. Now, do you want to just make a minimal profit? No, most organizations want to make as much profit as they possibly can. So most of the examples that we'll be using is for-profit. There are non-for-profits. They make money, maybe, but they don't return that money to the owners or the shareholders of the organization. They do something else with it. What do they do with it? If a charitable foundation makes money, well, they give more money away, in theory, to their constituents. If you're working for the Red Cross, what does the Red Cross do? What is their big thing that the Red Cross does? Nobody knows what the Red Cross does? They what? They help who?
The boards and like.
People in need, yeah. Disaster relief is one of the big things that the Red Cross does. So, they can make money, they get donations. If they make more money, if they invest it wisely, they're gonna use that money to do what? Help more victims of natural disasters and things like that. Governments also engage in goal making and marketing. So what's a government's goal? Well, it depends on the governmental unit. Let's take a police department, for example. What is the goal of a police department? What's the goal of the Edmond Police Department? Other than to harass innocent people. In theory, their goal is to lower crime rates through the protection and service to individuals. In theory, that's their goal. I think, having been a lawyer, I think most of their goals are to harass, people. When the man with the badge is talking to you, he is not your friend. Trust me.
2 hands on the wheel.
Don't think he's your friend. But in theory, their goal is to reduce crime. What's the goal overall of the city of Edmond? Well, it's to provide services like fire, police, protection, water, infrastructure to the citizens of the city of Edmond. So they all have goals. Types of for-profits. And a lot of what an organization's goals are going to be dependent upon the type of for-profit they are, or the type of government, or the type of nonprofit. We're going to focus mostly on for-profits. So the simplest form of organization that you can have in the United States is called a DBA, which stands for what? What's a DBA? You all are business students, this should come tripping off your tongue. What's a DBA? It's also sometimes referred to as a sole proprietorship. So what is DBA then? You have these devices you could look at.
The legal name of a company.
What does DBA stand for?
Doing business.
Doing business as. So you can have a DBA. A lot of companies are DBAs. A lot of businesses are DBAs.
Doing business.
Lots of people start out. What do? How many of you have seen the commercials for LegalZoom? So-and-so knows a lot about craft beers. He knows nothing about articles of incorporation. And the guy we don't allow talk like that in here. Lots of people do this. They have an idea. How many of you had a lawn mowing business, for example, when you were a kid? Went around and mowed yards. One person shaking their head. One of my first students that ever graduated from here years and years and years ago came to my office and he said, I got an offer as a marketing analyst for $35,000. And I was like, that's really good, Justin. And he said, yeah, the problem is that I made $250,000 last year with my yard company in Edmond. He started out in high school. His dad bought him a trailer, a lawnmower, and some equipment. And he had to pay his dad back and bought him a truck. And he went around Edmond mowing yards. And he got more and more customers and built up his business and hired more high school kids to mow yards. And he had a little lawn business. And did he have articles of incorporation? No, at the time he just had, Justin's Yard Service or something like that. And so you just get a lawnmower, weed eater, start mowing yards. It's very simple. You don't have to do anything to start it. If you have somebody else who can contribute to the business, you might join them. So Justin has Edmond, but he recognizes that somebody else has more, and if they pool their resources together, they can have a bigger yard business. Now they can do Edmond and Northwest Oklahoma City. So they've now got Justin and Dave's lawn mowing service, right? This is not true. Justin is true, but he didn't partner with me, but as far as I know. But now they've got 2 trucks, they can have more crews, whatever, and go do more. And then you have corporations. These are the standard forms for large organizations like Ford. They're going to have corporations. They form these to limit their liability so that you can pool capital, you can sell stock, and you can expand, in theory, to become a very large organization. And the organization is perpetual. It goes on. If you have a DBA, What happens when Justin gets run over by the Mack truck? Well, Justin's lawn service is over. If you have a partnership and both partners die, that's over. Ford has gone on for what? A long time. It's survived Henry Ford and his founding of the company and his death, and it continues on until it goes broke or something else happens. They disband it. So strategy. Long-term strategy. Usually you have long-term goals and short-term goals. So what are your long-term goals? I want to graduate with a degree in professional selling from the University of Central Oklahoma in 4 years. Well, that's your long-term goal for the 4 years when you started. What's your short-term goal? Well, you got to do what to achieve that goal? Yeah, you need to know how many credits you got to go enroll in those classes. If you want to graduate with a degree in professional, can you just take whatever you want? Can you take art history and student personnel services and recreation and leisure lifestyles? We have a class called that. We have a degree in recreation, by the way, here. I thought, that sounds like a degree for me. I know how to recreate. I took that class, it was hard. And what do you do with the degree in recreation? Well, you go run a parks department or something like that, not make a lot of money. So I decided that degree was not for me after careful consideration. But strategy is generally about long-term success, planning for the long term, going from broad to narrow. So at the corporate level, so lots of corporations have a big umbrella, and then they have what's called strategic business units underneath that umbrella. So Ford, for example, has several strategic business units. What are some of the strategic business units? So you've got Ford, the big corporation, which is an umbrella. And what do you have under the Ford umbrella? That's a dealer. So that's an independent licensed agent. But what else is under the Ford manufacturing umbrella? So you've got Ford cars and trucks. What else do you have? So you got
T-shirts, products, byproducts.
Ford cars, trucks. What else do you have under the Ford umbrella? What's another Ford brand? Lincoln, yeah. And what else is under the Ford brand? There's another one.
General Motors.
Nope, General Motors is a division, so you got GM. And GM has GM cars and trucks. They also have Chevy, right? Dodge is Dodge. Dodge is Chrysler.
Jeep.
Dodge Chrysler is another big umbrella. So Ford, you have Ford, Lincoln. What's the third big one with the Ford brand? They have more than this, by the way. Mercury.
Do they even make Mercury?
I think so. Don't they?
I don't know. I really don't think so.
I haven't, actually, let's look. That's a good question. It's a defunct division of Ford Motor Company, so they don't make Mercury anymore. So I guess we can scratch Mercury. They also have Ford Motor Credit, which is their financing arm, which is a strategic business unit. That's a separate business. So Ford Motor is in the business of manufacturing cars. Ford Motor Credit's in the business of what? Financing cars, right? So you have at the corporate level, the chairman and CEO of Ford are going to be worried about overall broad strategy. At Ford, you're going to have a more narrow focus, which is, focusing on coming up with new models, new ways. What's one of Ford's initiatives that they're taking recently? I do know this.
Getting electric.
Okay, they've done that. They're actually going to eliminate all of their car line, except for one. Their car line. They're eliminating all of their, one of the things they're gonna do is they're gonna phase out all of their cars except for one car. That's what they've said, what they've announced. What's Ford gonna keep?
Probably their Explorer.
No, that's not a car.
Mustang.
They're gonna keep the Mustang. So all of the Ford cars are gonna go away. That's one of their things. That's part of their SBU's strategies is they've recognized that what? Most people don't wanna ride in a car anymore, with the exception of like the Mustang. So they're gonna do what? What's more popular? What do you see more on the road these days? You see SUVs, right? More than cars. And so they're gonna eliminate most of their car lines and they're gonna go down to just trucks and SUVs and the Mustang. So that's part of Ford's car line strategy. And then you have underneath those SBUs, like Ford, you're gonna have divisions within Ford. So you're gonna have Ford trucks, you're gonna have Ford cars, you're gonna have, various departments in those divisions that are gonna have their goals. So you go from a broad to a narrow focus. At the functional level, what are gonna be the goals that they're working on? Well, it's gonna be shorter term, it's going to be more specific. So as you go from the broad at each of these levels, as you go down, you get more and more specific and more narrow. So long-term success. What leads to long-term success? Jim Collins and Jerry Parias wrote a book called Built to Last, Successful Habits of Visionary Companies. They studied 18 companies. Most of these have been established for nearly 100 years. Of these companies, they all outperformed the market. And what did they find led to long-term success? First of all, they found that they had a core set of values. Now, you can apply this to your life as well. Companies that are successful have a core set of values. And I would suggest to you that you should develop, you should think about what are your values? If you really want to be successful, what are your values? What is it that you value? Because that's going to help define success. I can tell you that my values have changed over time, and your values will probably change over time as well. When I was younger, I was very interested. The reason I became a lawyer was I wanted to be a big building lawyer. By big building lawyer, I mean I wanted to belong to a big firm or work for a corporation. And I wanted to make a lot of money. That was my goal, was to make a lot of money. And over time, I've come to realize that money's important to me. That's why I'm not a history professor, but I also value my time. I don't want to work 80 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
So, but long-term success has corporations that have long-term success and people who have long-term success have core values. Now, these are described as fundamental, passionate, and enduring principles. The interesting thing is that they don't have to be good values. One of the most successful companies that they highlighted was Philip Morris. What does Philip Morris manufacture? Who's a smoker? Nobody wants to admit it. Philip Morris manufactures what? Cigarettes. The corporate culture and values of Philip Morris were described as ruthless, cutthroat. The CEO was quoted as saying, "I see nothing morally wrong with selling a product that people don't need." Well, it's more than that. There are lots of products that people don't need. You don't need an iPhone. You may need a phone, but you don't need an iPhone. But it's not necessarily immoral. Cigarettes are not just something you don't need. They are what? They are bad for you. Right? So you don't necessarily have to have good values. Philip Morris versus Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson has what I consider to be morally good values. You should have a mission statement. What is it we do? And your text talks about Theodore Levitt's seminal article in marketing called Marketing Myopia. If you went back to the turn of the century, and I mean not the turn of the 21st century, but the turn of the 20th century, there were lots of the biggest companies in this country were railroad companies. And are the biggest companies in this country now railroad companies?
Hmm.
No. What are the biggest companies in this country today?
Oh, yes.
They're technology companies. Why are railroads no longer the biggest companies in the country? Well, at the turn of the 20th century, railroads were the bee's knees. They were the bomb.
Did you ever watch that show on like the History Channel? Like it's about like
The Men That Made America.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a great series.
really
Lots of railroad companies, they're not necessarily the biggest companies today. Why is it? Because they were really good at being railroad companies and they were myopic. What is myopic? Myopia, most people are slightly myopic. That's the reason I wear glasses or contacts, because I can't see
one-sided. or-
right very far out there. If I take these off, all of a sudden you all become blurry. I'm myopic. I can only see close up. And that's what this refers to. That's what Theodore Levitt was talking about. Railroad companies were myopic. They were good at being what? Railroad companies were what they should have been good at is being, what's the bigger industry that they're in? Transportation. Anybody want to go on a train today? Travel by train?
Mhm.
Only for some time.
Yeah, you can. You can take a train, I think still, the Heartland Flyer from Oklahoma City down to Dallas, Fort Worth. But most people don't want to be on a train anymore. Why? They might actually want to get there in a day.
Forever
So
been on it.
what do people travel on? So they were focused on being railroad companies. What they should have been focused on was being transportation companies. The vast majority of goods don't come by railroad anymore. They come in a variety of ways. If they had thought about transportation broadly, they would have recognized that, shipping, air, rail, trucking are all important components. And so they're not necessarily the biggest companies today because they were very myopic in their view. So growth strategies, diversification analysis. The Boston Consulting Group has a 2x2 matrix that's dependent upon your relative market share and the market growth, whether there's potential for growth and whether or not you have market share. So if you have high market share and high growth expectation, that's called the star. This is where you want to be. And a lot of times things start out in one quadrant and move to another. If there's low, this can be a cash, but you have a high market share, you've got a cash cow. If you have low and low, this is a dog. And then if you have low market share but good growth potential, you have a question mark. So let's take an example of how this would work. Let's take Apple and the iPhone, for example. Where do you think the iPhone is in this matrix?
Stars.
You think it's a star? Okay. Why is that?
Because it's their number one seller.
Okay, it's their number one seller. It may be a star, it may move. Oftentimes what happens is
Cash
they
cow.
start out as question marks, they move this way. When Apple released the iPhone, it was gonna be a question mark. People really
They
did
know what it
this
was.
thing, and they did. And it became a star. What's a cash cow for Apple right now? So you think this is a star, you think the iPhone's a star, what would be a cash cow for Apple?
Max.
Yeah, I think their computers would be a cash cow. That market is not necessarily growing, at least not in the United States anymore. It's not, you've got, it's pretty stable, so there's not a lot of growth potential, but they do have a pretty good share of it. Not the biggest share, but they have a pretty good share. What would be a dog? Yeah. Why would you have an iPod now? When iPods came out, they were definitely a
Star, for sure.
right? And then they moved into a cash cow, but why would you have an iPod now?
If you
You've
didn't have an
always got
iPhone,
this, and this functions as a what?
iPod.
An iPod. So why have a separate device? Yeah. Unless you're a runner who thinks that every ounce counts, you've got, shuffle or something like that. It's probably a dog. What's a question mark for Apple?
What's next?
Well, what is their latest stuff that they're releasing?
They got like the brand new iPad.
Okay,
I've seen it, it's pretty cool.
yeah. A lot of maybe their services are question marks. A lot of people have recognized, for example, Google has done this. Google thought, oh my gosh, Facebook has all this market share in social networking. We're gonna start, and they did something called what? Google Plus. I don't think it's a question mark anymore. I think it's probably another failure. Although we'll see, but Apple and all of the tech companies are moving into other things. Cloud computing. What's one of the things that Apple tries to do? As you fill up your device, it wants to back up all your photos and things like that. What are they trying to get you to do?
Buy more storage.
Buy more storage from them. The problem is that people don't really want to pay for that.
Mhm.
So that's maybe a question mark.
iCloud?
All right, I'm out of time. Talked about those. We'll talk about SWOT next time.
Is there anything we need to be doing like with the book?
Oh, if you talk to me today, you need to come up and I will give you points that we turn this off.
Just talk to
Get
you?
that.
Fuck, I talk to you.
Answer questions, read something. Let me turn off the live stream real quick.
In?
Yeah.